Let's do something a little different. Let's look at another. Let's actually make a game level variable, and we're going to work with kind of the hallmark of computer programming since the very early days. We're going to use an attribute called a boolean, and a boolean is basically we call it in programming a true-false statement, or you could think of it as on-off. Is a great way to really think about it in your head. True would be replaced by on, and false would be replaced by off. So let's go ahead and we're going to make an attribute, which we did by pushing this little X under the attributes tab, and we're going to choose a boolean. And let's just call it, let's call this, since we've already, let's build on the code that we already worked on that I still have. So let's call this change size. And this is a game level, see we're on game level attribute, which means that we're going to be able to see this attribute when we're trying to modify variables inside of actors. Anywhere. We can see this in the prototypes when we work on prototype actors, which means actors that we can just work in right out of the palette, which we'll do here. Because if it was a scene level attribute, you wouldn't be able to access it from the prototype or from the palette, and you wouldn't be able to see that variable if it's tied to a scene in another scene. So a lot of times you're going to want to use game level attributes because you can just access them through the code anywhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our if statement here, our rule, and we're going to do the same thing we have here. But what we're going to do is we're going to, instead of using a touch necessarily here to trigger the size change, we're going to change it, and we're going to actually use a variable or an attribute. So we're going to say if this attribute or variable, and we're going to open up the variable or attribute browser, and we're going to go to game because we're looking for a game level information, and we're going to go to our change size boolean, and we're going to just double click on that, and it's going to bring it up, and automatically you can see that the computer recognizes that's a boolean, and it's going to give us either two conditions, true or false, on or off. So we're going to say if it's true. Okay, so if a game change size variable that we just made is true, then it's going to change the width to 50. If it's false, then it's going to change it to 100. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add another if statement. Let's just call these, let's just make this, and I like to think of it as if statements. So I'm just going to keep putting if statements in here. And we're going to say if touch is pressed. Let's actually do released so that we actually, let's just do pressed. Let's just do pressed for right now. And let's go ahead and change the attribute. So if touch is pressed, we're going to change the attribute. We're going to change the boolean. So we're going to tell it, we're going to say we want to change its condition. Because if we just started this right now and we didn't have any other logic in here to tell the computer what to do when touch is pressed, it wouldn't do anything. So we want to change the condition of that boolean. So we're going to say, okay, we're accessing you, so we're telling we want to change this attribute, this boolean. It starts off as false. That's its default condition, to, and we can just type in, and make sure you don't put capitals in there. We're going to type in true. Okay, so when we go in now and when we push this, and then we'll go ahead and do one more thing. We can actually display variables. So let's go ahead and make another actor, and we'll call it display. And then what we're going to do in this actor is we're going to go ahead and go down and find our display text, which is kind of a misnomer. You can actually display anything. You can display any variable, numbers, whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the expression editor, and we're going to find that variable. So we're going to go to game, and we change size, and we're going to say display that. Show us the condition that is at any given moment. So let's just change the color from white so that we can see it, and we'll back off. And we'll put that display up here real quick. And we'll just stretch it out a little bit. And now we'll be able to see, it'll tell us the condition. So let's go ahead and hit preview. And you can see its default is false. So it's telling us that that attribute that we made, change width or change size, is false. That's how it starts. That's how the computer, every time it starts. So when we push, true. When we release, doesn't do anything. Why? Because we haven't told it to go back. We just told it when we push you, change. It's like a switch. If you went up and pushed a switch and hit a switch to on, it's going to stay on until you come back and turn it off. So let's go ahead back here and let's go into our rule, our if statement. And now let's go into we know how the otherwise section works now. And now sometimes this can act hinky, but Booleans can be kind of tricky in otherwise statements. But I'm pretty sure it'll work in this one the way we want it to. You just have to be careful with them. Sometimes they don't like, they act weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that, and we're going to change it back. We're going to tell the computer that when we're not pressing, to change back to false, all lowercase. So let's go ahead and do this, and it's false. When we're pushing it, it's true. Release it, goes back to false. And why did it do that? Because we told it to do that. That's why we told it. We're telling the computer, if this condition, change size, is true, do these. If it's not, go back. Then we're telling it, if you're pressed, do this. And if you're not pressed, go back to false. And that's what we're doing in here. When this goes back to false, it does this rule. So you can start to see the logic developing now. We're telling things to do stuff. And we're telling things to what to do when, based on how a variable is set. And we could trigger this on any kind of variable. When that, if we made that actor move, and we said, when you reach screen position 80 by 25, make that variable true. We could do that. Okay? And all this stuff builds on each other. Once you really understand logic and controlling variables and changing variables, and realize that when you change something one way, you have to change it back. A lot of people just think, oh, the computer knows that it's supposed to start out as false. Well, it knows that when it first starts, but once you change a condition, the computer doesn't know to change it back. You have to tell the computer to change it back. And see, everything you do, everything you modify, every variable you adjust, you have to change it back. And all these behaviors are watch for changes in conditions of variables, whether they're text, whether they're integers, whether they're colors. Any variable you can monitor and modify, you can access in GameSalad, and you can set conditions of the change of other variables based on any other variable. That's pretty much, basically how this stuff works in GameSalad. So this is the first kind of look at the basics, and hoping that it's kind of helping you start to begin to understand thinking and logic. And then once you can think in logic, you can actually start to think about your code in your head. And you can actually start to plan and plot out, well, if I change this to true, but if I tell it, well, don't change to true until you reach 100 pixels, and then I can tell it's like a chain reaction. It's like dominoes. You start linking these things together, and then when you push that first domino down, it knocks the second domino down, it knocks the third domino down, it knocks the fourth domino down. Okay? And so you're basically linking all these different things together in what we call conditional statements or if statements, and to say, if this happens, then do this. If this something else happens, then do that. And all these things are linked, and the computer is watching for the changes in events of all these different things. And that's all you're doing in GameSalad. in programming, period. That's all you're doing is changing things, changing one variable or attribute to another piece of a variable from whatever you program it in to be. If you want something to change when the size is 50, then you make a rule in your actor, say watch the size of this when you're 50, then change your color. And it just changes, and you can start to see how the computer's working and how you start to think in terms of logic. All right, so I hope this is helping people, and I'll just keep kind of progressing on in the series, and we'll start looking at different types and then linking stuff together, and then we'll kind of take this around and just keep adding and adding and adding, and so you can really start to think in logic and really start to actually look past the GUI in GameSalad and actually start to look into how the computer's thinking and how the engine's thinking, and it really empowers you in your programming. All right, have a good one.